Mr. Johnson, you're still under oath?
Yes, my lady.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Roux.
Thank you, my lady. Mr. Johnson, last time you were here, I dealt with aspects in your evidence that, according to what I put to you, were very, very similar to the evidence of your wife. You remember that?
Yes, my lady, I remember.
Yes. And I also asked questions about the contamination of your evidence because of her evidence. You remember that?
My lady, I do remember.
I had occasion to look at your evidence in that respect. And I want to read something to you. And, my lady, that record is not yet available, but it's a very short passage. I will make it available. Not to interfere with the official transcript, but I will be at pains to read it absolutely accurately. It's very small. And that is, when I asked you about this coincidence of your evidence being so similar to hers, notwithstanding the fact that those aspects were not contained in your statements. You said the following, and I want you to listen very carefully, and if you want, I will repeat it to you. When I asked you if you could describe that to coincidence, you said, "My lady, I don't think it is coincidence. My wife testified she's been an aerobics instructor for close to 20 years, a part-time hobby, so she counts rhythms and numbers," and you carried on. You remember? It is that first part of your sentence. My wife testified, and you were right. That was her testimony. It was not in her statement, not in your statement. And I didn't pick it up. But you said, "My wife testified." Can you explain that, please?
My lady, as I explained yesterday, after the incident, before we made any notes or any statements to the police officers, we obviously discussed what we had witnessed or what we had observed that evening. And with both of us being analytical persons or people, we wondered, why did she remember the number of shots? And that's what I explained yesterday. And at that point, in the first days after the incident, we had come to that conclusion. That is why she, based on her aerobics experience and piano music background, she counted consciously or subconsciously, and that was our conclusion. So I've been aware of that opinion, shared opinion if you like, since before we even made the first statement. So if I then said, like Advocate Roux said, my wife testified, I can't explain why I said that. I stated again that I did not hear her testimony. We did not discuss her testimony in court.
You are satisfied with your answer?
I'm satisfied with my answer.
I've dealt with this. It's on record. I'm not going back what was in evidence and so on. Let's move on. I'm also going to ask you, and I put it to you, because I did so when I asked questions, put questions to your wife, that there is a striking similarity, between your statement and her statement made to Captain van Aert.
My lady, when Captain van Aert came to take our statements, we were not present while the other one gave their statements. In fact, I was not at home at the time when my wife gave her statement. I had a business meeting that evening. Captain van Aert asked us to relate our version to him, which we did, and he would then write it down. He has a systematic methodology of taking a statement, which I am not familiar with. I've never made a statement before, so I entrusted my faith and trust in the process that Captain van Aert would guide me through the process. So I would relate my version. Captain van Aert would write a sentence and ask me, am I satisfied that that reflects my version? And I would say yes. And that is how my statement was made. I cannot testify for how my wife's statement was taken.
How do you know that Captain van Aert has a set methodology? You've just met him that day, and you only know about your statement. So who told you that?
My lady, nobody told me that. It's an assumption that I made. I would assume that a professional and veteran of I don't know how many years service in the police service would ultimately develop a process of repeating the same steps over and over again. So I don't know it. It's an assumption.
I must say to you, when I dealt with the similarities, one aspect that was really important was your telephone number, but I hope that Mr. Nell yesterday relayed to you my apology that it came out. I did not at that particular point realize the consequences. It was in a very different context. So I hope that I asked him to tell you that I apologize for that, and it was not intended in any other way.
Thank you very much. Apology accepted.
Yes. Now, I want you to explain to the court the process followed by Captain van Aert when you deposed to your affidavit.
I beg your pardon?
The process followed by Captain van Aert. I don't want contents now, but just the process followed by him when you made your statement.
My lady, he asked me to tell him my entire story, which I did from start to end, and then he said, let's start at the beginning. And he would say, is this true? Make a statement, and I would say yes, and then he would take it down. And so he followed chronologically through the events of that evening, and that's how the process worked.
Did you give him your notes?
I did not. I mentioned that I had notes, but he said I should keep them safe and private. I did not give him a copy of my notes, my lady.
Because my understanding yesterday in your evidence is this, that you accurately recorded everything, all the events in your notes, and then I was trying to understand why just did you not hand over to him your notes?
My lady, as I mentioned, I mentioned to Captain van Aert that I have these notes available, and he did not request to have them. He was satisfied just to take the statement.
I understand, because, and why I'm asking the question, because that was an accurate recordal of the events as seen by you, and it would have made it a lot easier for Captain van Aert, not so.
I cannot comment whether it would have made his job any easier. Sorry, my lady.
And you were then kind enough to make your notes available to us.
Yes, my lady. 3 versions of the set of notes.
Sorry?
I made 3 versions of my notes available to you.
They were all made on the 6th of March 2013.
If I recall correctly, yes, my lady.
Certain corrections on them between certain hours on the 6th of March 2013.
That is correct, my lady. My final version was contained in an email that I sent to Advocate Nikki Maritz, and that was also sent on the, if I'm not mistaken, the 3rd of March.
6th of March.
I beg your pardon, 6th of March, just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Understanding is that the wife had notes, and we were told yesterday that those notes were destroyed.
Can you please just repeat the first part of your sentence?
We understand yesterday, when we spoke about the notes after the adjournment, that your wife had destroyed her notes.
My lady, I was present at my residence when we collected the notes, but I have no knowledge of what notes my wife provided. It was kept on her own personal computer, so I can't provide any detail or confirm what Advocate Roux is stating now.
Are you satisfied that is a correct answer, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I'm confident.
Did you follow the question?
Perhaps if you can just rephrase, let me confirm, please.
Well, the first question was this, that we were told in our uncertain terms, we were all standing together, it's not something off the record, that she had destroyed her notes.
My lady, I'm sorry, I cannot recall that.
You don't know about that.
But lady, may I likewise say that I don't know that. So if it's put by Mr. Roux, you should perhaps put it in context, because I also don't know. I wasn't present during that, and the state weren't informed.
I'll come back to it because Junior was present. It doesn't matter, I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it. If you say you don't know about it for the time being, then that's your answer. And that is your answer, as I understand it, that you don't know anything about it.
Yes.
In fact, it seems that you don't know anything about her notes.
My lady, as I've testified, I am not aware of the content of her notes. I was under the impression that we both made notes. I sent my notes to Advocate Nikki Maritz. I supplied my wife with Advocate Nikki Maritz's email address and assumed that she had also sent her version or her notes to Mr. Maritz.
No, but that version is something else. That's a version after the police had come to her on the 6th of March of 2055. We know that the police, 2 policemen if I'm not mistaken, visited the house a week before your statements, which is the 6th of March. We know it was in the evening, and we know of a statement created on the 6th of March 2055. That's after the visit of the policeman.
May I just interject? Is this put as a fact by counsel that the police visited that house on the 6th of March? Or is it an assumption, or is it an inference from from a week before or something like that. I think that should be clear, my lady, because there's a difference between, we make an inference because you say it's a week before, and we put it to you as a fact that the police were there at a specific time. So I would want counsel to clarify that.
Hold this, my lady. Mr. Johnson, you said that a week before you deposed your statement, there was a visit by police to your house. You remember that? It's in your evidence.
What exactly are you referring to, Mr. Roux?
Before, the first time that policeman came to your house, it was a week before you deposed your affidavit.
That is correct, my
You deposed your affidavit on the 13th, a week before was the 6th.
I accept that.
And you said it was in the evening.
That is correct.
Yes. And what I put to you, the note that you referred to, is a note at 20:55, but we'll come to it, at 20:55 on the 6th of March, which would coincide with that visit.
My lady, can I just clarify the note that Advocate Roux is referring to? Is it my note or my wife's note?
No, your wife's note.
As I've already testified, I made an assumption. I cannot guarantee that she created notes and forwarded that to Advocate Murder.
Yes. But we'll get to that. Now, let me make available, in fairness to you, your notes as modified. It's 3 of them. You can look at them. It's coming from your computer, your laptop, and the last one transferred to your iPad.
My lady, may I just confirm which version of my notes it
We
is?
will give you all 3 versions.
Very well.
My lady, may this be accepted as Exhibit 01, 02, and 03.
Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you very much. The first one is Exhibit 01. The second is Exhibit 02. And the third is marked Exhibit 03.
Lady, may I inquire from you? We marked it on top 1, 2, 3 to avoid confusion which one is which one.
That's how I marked them.
Yes, thank you, my lady. I was
Yes.
not sure that your copy had also the 1, 2, and 3 on top.
Yes, it has.
I just wanted to thank you, my lady. You have your notes in front of you, and you would have looked carefully at your notes last night, not so we don't have to waste a lot of time on that, Mr. Johnson.
I'm fairly familiar with my notes, my
Yes,
lady.
you looked at it last night.
That is correct.
Yes. So you can confirm these are in fact the notes.
If I'm given the opportunity to...
You can look at it again. Take your time. I've put them in a sequence of when they were created and changed. And you can check if that's correct. Take your time.
My lady, I am comfortable with the contents of these notes.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson, it's just because I didn't hear you.
Just to repeat, I'm comfortable with the notes. It does look like my notes.
And in the sequence that I put them.
Correct.
Thank you. Now, the notes are there for us to read at a convenient time, but let us get to some of the points. There is first a location, a heading, then recollection of the events. You see that? And I'm dealing with note 1, I'm sorry, note 1. And then a third paragraph or a second paragraph under the heading recollection of events. You see that?
I do.
And it starts with the following. It says, at that point, my wife, who woke up as I got out of bed, shouted at me, "Don't just stand there," phoned the security and handed me a phone.
I accept that.
It is so accurate, your note at that time, that you were in a position to quote words used by her. You're not again, if you can say yes or no?
I accept that, yes.
And that was, in all fairness to you, Mr. Johnson, that was your evidence yesterday as well, that she woke up because of you getting out of bed. Then if you go to the second page, on top, it says, and if you can read that into record, the first paragraph on the second page.
Should I read the entire paragraph?
Just, yeah, the first paragraph.
We were convinced that what we heard were the calls for help of people who were being attacked in their house. This could be influenced by our prejudice, as there was a housebreaking and attack on a woman who lived in the Silverwoods at the end of 2011 or early 2012. I was also woken up by the woman's calls for help in that case, and in a way the 14 Feb incident was a mild case of deja vu.
Yes, now let's look at that. If you go to the fourth paragraph, the last sentence.
Fourth paragraph on the second page, my lady.
Yeah. Starts with also the screams.
My lady, can I just confirm, are we on the first or the second page?
Second page, I'm sorry, fourth paragraph.
My fourth paragraph starts with, after Willem called a few
Yes,
people.
and then go to the last sentence.
Oh, sorry, the last. Also, the screams did not sound like fighting, but more like panic and distress calls of someone being attacked.
It tells you one thing, that in your mind, none of the screams, and I'm referring to the screams by the man, could resemble a mockery. It was genuine to you.
My lady, something that I've related to, it was part of my version that I related to my colleagues. It's not contained in my notes or my statement, because it's a subjective perception, was the contrast between the, I don't know how to express this, the fear and intensity in the lady person's voice versus a very monotone male voice. What I related to my colleagues was, at that point I thought the attackers had left the house because the man almost sounded embarrassed to be calling for help. And I thought they'd been locked up in a room or tied up, and he felt embarrassed to be calling for assistance from his neighbors. So, like I say, it's my impression that I got. It was something that struck me at that point.
Yes, Mr.
So my reference to the panic and distress calls of someone being attacked is with specific reference to the lady person that I heard.
Mr. Johnson, I know that you studied these notes quite well to get to answers today, and I want to put it to you. It's unfortunate because your interpretation today is a designed one. It's designed to try and again sideline and incriminate the accused, because that is not in the first paragraph that I read to you. That's not what you were saying, and it's not in this paragraph. But there's a design on your side to incriminate, and that's unfortunate. But we'll deal with it. That's what I put to you. Do you want to answer?
My lady, I do not agree. I have no reason to want to design a incriminating statement or case. It's not the truth.
I can unfortunately assume your next answer, but I'm first going to ask. Go to the very last paragraph at page 2 and just read that out. That's with reference to your wife.
Should I read the entire paragraph?
From her version.
Oh, her version was the same as I explained above. Then I told her about the rumors about
So her
Oscar
version
Pistorius.
was the same as what you explained above. She agreed with this.
That is correct, and may I just put it in context? Her version is the version she related to me on the telephone the morning of the event, or the incident, when I phoned her to inform her of what I'd learned.
Mr. Johnson, it's not true. Read the sentence, please. Her version is the same, not as she related to me on the telephone, as explained above. I knew this was coming, that's why I asked you. It's the same as I explained above. That's what stands there, not so. Those are the written words.
My lady, I think if one reads the entire paragraph, it might provide better context.
Yes, Mr. Just read those words to the court. I just need the words. Her version, can you read it out?
My lady, the witness said, I need an opportunity to read the full paragraph because it will take it into context. I don't think that's unreasonable. The witness should be afforded the opportunity to do right, just that, for him to explain the last sentence. I don't think it's unreasonable, and I think Mr. Roux should give him an opportunity to do so.
Yes,
Can read
Mr.
it,
Roux.
ladies. Very well. You can read it if you want to.
Thank you very much. After Willem told me he heard it was Oscar who shot his girlfriend, I called my wife and asked her to relate her version of the sequence of events of what we heard on the 14th of February 2013. I did not tell her about what I had heard regarding Oscar and the incident, as I did not want to shock her and put doubt in her mind about what she had heard. Here comes the sentence. Her version, and that's the version that she related during that phone call, was the same as I explained above. I then told her about the rumors about Oscar Pistorius. I used the word the same. I could have used similar. What I'm referring to is it was similar to what I had experienced and what I had remembered. And with specific reference that we were under the impression of people being attacked in their house.
Mr. Johnson, let me be...
If I can just have the opportunity, it's not stated here clearly, but this was a rough draft to remind myself. It's not supposed to be used as facts. You understand? It's like a note.
Mr. Johnson, you know, I'm going to put to you, and I'm going to show to the court what you're doing. You studied this note last night, that we know. Because you know what I've not dealt with in this note. And you know what is coming. And you desperately, that's what I put to you, try now to extricate your wife's version from this version, and I quote, her version was the same as explained above. You desperately want her version not to form part of this document. That is what you're doing. You agree?
My lady, I do not agree.
What we also know...
Just 1 minute. I don't think I follow.
Thank you, my lady.
The version that you're talking about her evidence here in court.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what it's in her
May I
notes.
properly put it, my lady? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Mr. Johnson, first of all, you studied this document last night.
My lady, study might be a very strong expression.
Yes.
I scanned through the three versions. I was extremely exhausted last night and did not have the energy to apply my mind to it. I rely on the notes as they are today to refresh my memory.
The second point is that when I put earlier to you about the accuracy of this version, you had no difficulty to say to me, no, that is not correct, Mr. Roux. It is not accurate.
My lady, sorry, I'm not following. Can you please...
Previously, when I asked you questions, I referred to the accuracy of this version, and what you did not do, on two occasions I did. You did not say to me, sorry, Mr. Roux, that's wrong. It's not an accurate note. When I referred to the accuracy of the notes, you did not say it's wrong.
Yes. I don't follow what Mr. Roux is implying.
I also don't follow.
I put it to you through earlier that this was an accurate version.
My lady, I did make reference that these were rough notes to be used to remind myself. We are dealing with the first version, and it's common business practice. If you draft documents, and I write a lot of reports, we create different versions. First draft, second draft, final version. This is how the notes were intended, and how I refined them as I applied my mind.
And what I then put to you, and that's
Let me just try once more. When you're talking about the correct version, are you talking about the
the
authenticity
notes, like the correctness, the accuracy
of
the notes.
Okay, all right, all right.
But, and what I then put to you, where the court asked me to just put it proper, was what you're doing. You know what I'm going to refer to in this document, and I have not as yet done it. But what you want to extricate any suggestion that this version was also your wife's version. When you said her version was the same as I explained above, you want that out. That's what I say to you.
My lady, I dispute that.
Are you happy that it was also the same as your wife's version?
My lady, I'm not certain if I follow what Advocate Roux is implying. As I explained, the sentence here, where I say her version was the same as I explained above, I'm referring to the version that she related to me the first time she repeated her version that morning of the event on the telephone, before I informed her that Mr. Oscar Pistorius was involved. I'm not, and I want to say that again, I'm not aware of the content of her testimony. I've never read her notes, and I've never read her affidavit or statement that was made to Captain van Aert.
What I'm putting to you, and I'm going to put it again, what you referred to, where you said her version was the same.
Lady, I object. We've now asked that question over and over and over again, my lady. That happens. If you ask a question once or twice, that's fine. I haven't counted, but it's at least 4 or 5 times. That the same question's been answered by this witness. His answer will not change. Lady, we have to move on to other questions. We can't keep the witnesses here and repeat the same question.
I'm not sure. That question was not even finished. How do you know it's the same question?
Then I'll just wait with my objection. I apologize.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, my lady. That's something else. I was putting something to you now. I put it to you that the reference to her version was the same as explained above. Was this your version that you explained above? There's only one version that you explained above. That's what it says.
My lady, can I please just clarify? Mr. Advocate who keeps on referring to her version. Which version is he referring to?
Yes. Mr. Johnson, I'm now going to show to you why I put it to you so desperate to extricate your wife from this. Let's go to the first page. And that is what it's all about. That's why you desperately want to move away from this. Go to the first page. The second last paragraph. Please read that into the record.
I did not count the number of shots that were fired, but my wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots.
Let's stop there. It has 2 elements. The first one is about you. I did not count the number of shots that were fired. Let's stop there. Is that true?
My lady, if my memory serves me correctly, I did testify that in my initial testimony, and if I recall correctly, it's also verified in my statement to Captain van Aert.
Not a sign of 5 to 6 shots. Nothing. No reference to 5 to 6 shots in this. In this note of yours, it is clear I did not count the number of shots that were fired. There is no reference to 5 to 6 shots. Do you agree?
I agree, my lady.
Then the second part. But my wife, and granted, before I read it, you revisited this an hour or 2 later, and you slightly changed that. And I will deal with the change. But this is the important part. But my wife recalls about 4 or 5 shots. Is that your words?
My lady, that is what I've written.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is so removed from this musical talent to count shots, like in music, exact 4. It is not the same.
My lady, as I've mentioned before, I created these notes as a recollection for myself, as notes. I can't, how can I put this? It's the accuracy of this. I mean, I'm being questioned here with a very strong line of questioning on something that I wrote while I was at the office, probably supposed to be doing other work. So it's a rough guideline. That's what my intentions were. If I may, can we refer to my statement to Captain van Aert? What mention do I make there of how many shots? If I recall correctly, I think 5 or 6 shots was mentioned. And if I remember correctly, that is what I also related to my colleagues. I said I didn't count the shots, but I estimated 5 or 6 shots. That's my version. It's been my version since the first time I repeated the version. Before I made a statement, it became clear from the, the bail application, that there were 4 shots fired. But I did not change my version. Even though I received confirmation, my version, initial version, was that I did not count them. My wife said she counted 4 shots or 5 shots.
And I'm going to help you. You know, 3 hours later, that will go to version 2, you change this paragraph, because it tells me it was not only a note, it was a note that you went back to 3 hours later, that you looked at it again, and you corrected little things. That is not a sign of a careless note that I just put somewhere. It's a sign I go back, I revisit that note, I'm very careful about it, and then I amend it, but we'll come to the amendment, and then I amend it. Now this is the question. Do you agree that approximately, I can give you the exact answer, it doesn't matter, approximately 3 hours later, you amended this note?
My lady, as I've mentioned before, it's intended as a draft version. Draft implies it will change. So I can concede I did make changes.
About 3 hours later, you made changes to this note.
That is correct, my lady.
Yes.
For people, we wondered, why did she remember the number of shots? And that's what I explained yesterday. And at that point, in the first days after the incident, we had come to that conclusion. That is why she, based on her aerobics experience and piano music background, she counted consciously or subconsciously, and that was our conclusion. So I've been aware of that opinion, shared opinion if you like, since before we even made the first statement. So if I then said, like Advocate Roux said, my wife testified, I can't explain why I said that. I stated again that I did not hear her testimony. We did not discuss her testimony in court.
You are satisfied with your answer? The contamination of your evidence because of her evidence. You remember that?
My lady, I do remember.
I had occasion to look at your evidence in that respect. And I want to read something to you. And, my lady, That record is not yet available, but it's a very short passage. I will make it available, not to interfere with the official transcript, but I will be at pains to read it absolutely accurately. It's very small. And that is, when I asked you about this coincidence of your evidence being so similar to hers, notwithstanding the fact that those aspects were not contained in your statements. You said the following, and I want you to listen very carefully, and if you want, I will repeat it to you. When I asked you if you could describe that to coincidence, you said, "My lady, I don't think it is coincidence. My wife testified she's been an aerobics instructor for close to 20 years, a part-time hobby, so she counts rhythms and numbers," and you carried on. You remember? It is that first part of your sentence. My wife testified, and you were right. That was her testimony. It was not in her statement, not in your statement. And I didn't pick it up. But you said, "My wife testified." Can you explain that, please?
My lady, as I explained yesterday, after the incident, before we made any notes or any statements to the police officers, we obviously discussed what we had witnessed or what we had observed that evening. And with both of us being analytical persons, I'm satisfied with my answer.
I've dealt with this. It's on record. I'm not going back what was in evidence and so on. Let's move on. I'm also going to ask you, and I put it to you, because I did so when I asked questions and put questions to your wife, that there is a striking similarity, between your statement and her statement made to Captain van Aert.
My lady, when Captain van Aert came to take our statements, we were not present while the other one gave their statements. In fact, I was not at home at the time when my wife gave her statement. I had a business meeting that evening. Captain van Aert.
Mr. Johnson, you're still under oath?
Yes, my lady.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Roux.
Thank you, my lady. Mr. Johnson, last time you were here, I dealt with aspects in your evidence that, according to what I put to you, were very, very similar to the evidence of your wife. You remember that?
Yes, my lady, I remember.
Yes. And I also asked questions about